So we're going to talk about group juggle as a warm-up activity for helping people learn names and get to know each other. So for a small group, you'll get them gathered in a standing circle with elbow room between each other. You'll take one object. In this case, we're using a tennis ball, although we generally recommend something a little lighter and softer. Very simply, what you're going to do is have everyone go around the circle and say their name. And typically, I like to hand the ball to the person who's going to say their name. And we want them to pronounce it the way they want it said so that we can learn and listen and hear exactly where the name should be said. So I would go first. I would say, my name is Lou, and the group can potentially say back the name so they can practice saying it out loud. Pass it to one side. That person says their name. The object gets passed around very quickly. We're just getting the name with the face. You go around a second time, and this time I would hold up the object, and without saying my name, the group then says it again, and I'm listening to hear if it's right and if it's off, and I can do a very positive correction of pronunciation. And then I pass again to the person to my left or right. They hold the object, the group says back their name, continues around. So then we add the juggling layer, which makes it more fun, but yet continues to be a chance to promote names. So now I take the object, I'm going to identify somebody in the circle. The sequence is you're going to say their name so they know the object is going to be thrown towards them. I'm going to very gently, underhand, not overhand, throw the object towards them. They're going to retrieve it, and then they're going to thank me and say my name. So if I'm throwing to John, I would say, hey John, throw him the object, he collects it, says thank you very much, Lou. Then he takes the object and throws it to somebody else, whomever he wants. In the setup of the activity, we want to encourage people to not just throw to the people that they know, but to look at the name tag if there is one. To ask someone, I'm sorry, what's your name again? Okay, I got it. And then say their name and throw it. It's very structured, but the sequence matters in terms of say their name for safety and learning. Throw the object. They receive it. They thank you. Say your name, and then throw the object onto someone else. And you challenge people to use the opportunity to throw the objects to people they don't know and make sure they get the names right. The activity is fun. It's engaging. You have to kind of be ready to listen for your name, but also be listening and learning about people's names as well. You play that, depending on the size of the group, for 30, 45 seconds, maybe a minute. As you're playing, though, you start with one object, and as people get comfortable and they understand the sequence, then you add a second object, and then a third object. Generally, 3 to 4, even for a group of upwards of 20, is the right amount. We're not looking to create chaos. We're not looking to have too many objects being thrown that someone get hit with. We want to keep enough objects in the system that everybody's listening and waiting for their turn. When the round is over, all the objects are returned to you gently, and you ask if somebody could name everybody in the group. Depending on if they know each other from before or how big the group is, that's either going to be a very exciting or less exciting challenge, but either way, if the group needs to learn names, which this activity is for, then somebody should take the chance to do that. Then you add a next round. You start with the same object, and this time, you hold up the object and you're going to say something about where you're from. 1 or 2 words. And it could be the city that you were born in, the country that you're from, something that you are very proud of about where you're from. It's up to you. Each person gets to choose. So for example, if I am from Pittsburgh, which I am, I might just say Pittsburgh. And now people are affiliating my hometown with me. Person to their left, maybe they are naming a very famous sports team or another element of that city that it's famous for, a landscape, a building, etc. Somebody else may be naming a food or a dance or a piece of their culture, but it's one word that associates that person with a piece of their origin. So we go around, each person says it, then we go around again as before, and now I'm holding the object and everyone else is saying, Pittsburgh, and we pass it around. And this time we return to the juggling game, but now we're not using names, we're only using the words that we learned that help us identify something unique about where that person is from. So now I would throw the object to someone and I might say, Yankees, and they catch it. Somebody else, and then they would say, thank you, Pittsburgh. So then the Yankees person would throw it, and they might say, for example, Mount Rainier. And you would say, Mount Rainier catches it, and you would say, thank you, Yankees. And again, it's challenging, it's hard to remember, you're trying to place it, you have to ask, but we're promoting the conversation, we're promoting the beginning of getting to know each other, we're allowing people permission to get it wrong in learning names and make mistakes about who people are. You play the game for 1 or 2 minutes, then you stop and you see if anybody can name now everybody's name and where they're from, or the element of what they shared about where they're from as well. And afterwards, it's a wonderful discussion, brief but meaningful, talk about how we get to know each other, what the beginning of learning each other's stories is like, and some of the fun parts of how we associate people with special things that matter to them as well. That's group juggle. This is the facilitation video for group juggle, focusing on productivity and flow. You'll start with the group standing in a circle, some arms length apart, or elbows length apart, and you'll have one object in front of you. And ideally, you're not in the system, you're standing next to the group, setting them up. So the first thing you'll ask is, you'll take the object that you have, and you'll invite one person to be the start person for the activity. You'll hand them the object. What you'll explain is, instruction-wise, is to set this up, is the following. Take the object, and you're gonna throw it to someone in the group. Their job is to receive it, and then throw it to someone else. You're gonna keep throwing so that everybody catches it once before it comes back to the start person. Nobody should catch it more than once, and ideally, we're not throwing it to anybody on either side of us. So, first person goes, they throw, it's not a race, they're setting up the sequence. So they're creating a sequence that everybody catches it once before it comes back to them. So really the only thing they have to worry about is who's throwing it to you and who are you throwing it to. So one person throws it, they receive it. They catch it, throw to someone else, around, back and forth, until it comes back to the start person. This should take no more than 30 to 45 seconds. Once they've done that, you ask them to repeat that sequence, the exact same sequence, at least 3 or 4 more times until they have it memorized. Start person throws to the exact same person they did before. That person throws to the same person, same person, same person, same person, same person, until it comes back to the start person. Once you've set that sequence, now you're ready to begin. So first you'll say, wherever you're standing, that's where you need to stay. You can't make the circle bigger or smaller, and you cannot change places in the circle. We're gonna play 3 rounds. In the first round, and for all 3 rounds actually, you're gonna have 25 seconds to score as many points as possible. Here's how you score points. When I say go, the start person takes the object and throws it in the same sequence you just set. As soon as that object completes the sequence and comes back to the start person, that is 1 point. Once you catch it as a start person, you can throw it immediately again to the same person, and your goal is to try to get through the cycle as many times as you can in 25 seconds. Every time through is worth a point. Every time there is a drop, meaning the object is not caught and hits the ground, you will lose a point. It's up to each person in the circle to remember if they dropped the object. If they did, at the end of the round, the start person will calculate how many times they received the ball, because that's how many points your team earned. And everybody else who dropped one will hold up a finger for how many drops, and you will subtract those drops from the total. So the start person's job is to keep track of how many times they receive the ball, because every receiving of the ball is worth a point. That's how we'll play round 1. Get ready, on your mark, get set, go. Team goes, 25 seconds. Typically, a team of 8 to 12 is going to score somewhere between 3 and 5 points. Time is up. You ask for their score. First thing is calculate catches to drops. Let's say their score is 4. Congratulations, that's round 1. Let's now play round 2. For round 2, you'll have a bag prepared in advance with more objects. Typically, the number of objects in that bag needs to equal the number of team members. It shouldn't be less, and it's okay if it's more. So in a team of 10 people, with 1 object already in play, that bag should have at least 9 more objects in it. You'll hand that bag to the start person, and you will say to them, your job in this round is to get every single object into the system. You cannot keep them in the bag and throw them all at once. You must take them all out of the bag. As soon as you throw 1 to the first person and they catch it, you must throw the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And when they come back to you, that's a point, right? So you're keeping score, but you cannot put the object on the ground or hold it. You must keep the objects going. So you're not the end, you're the middle, just like you were in round 1. All the objects in the system. As a reminder, if anybody makes a drop, and it's funny because in the second round people are anticipating, there'll be more drops because there's now 10 objects, not one. Anybody who makes a drop, remember your drops. At the end of the round, you will hold up the number of fingers of how many times you dropped an object. We will add them up. We'll subtract that from the total that the start person is remembering, and that will be your score for round 2. If you're receiving objects and you drop one and it goes off to the side or in the middle, you still must retrieve it. You cannot leave it on the ground. So any object that is now put in the system, you must keep going through the system for the whole 25 seconds. On your mark, get set, go. You may need to give them a few seconds to take the objects out and have the start person get organized and hold them. You play round 2. Typically for round 2, there's going to be many mistakes and not many objects will go through. Teams may score 3, 5, 8 objects through, maybe a little bit more, but there will be 5, 10, 15 drops. And in some cases, their score is actually negative for round 2. Round 2 is over. You'll reconvene the group, and now you'll announce what's going to happen for round 3, and you'll say the following. For round 3, there's actually going to be 2 attempts. You'll get to do the same thing twice. This time, the only difference is 25 seconds as before. Same throwing sequence. Cannot change place in the circle. Cannot shrink or grow the circle. This time, for round 3, you need to decide how many objects you want to use that you believe will optimize your score. And then you allow the team about a minute, minute and a half to debate and discuss how many objects. Some will want to go high, some will want to go low. They will settle on a number. If the objects are of different size and configuration, maybe they're not all the same in terms of how they look, they may even want to choose the right objects they want to use. That's fine. You'll ask for how many objects they're going to use, and then you'll play the first attempt of round 3. 25 seconds. You'll announce their score, they'll subtract their negatives, you'll track their score, and then you'll say, we have one more attempt to even improve your score more if you improved. Do you want to change your objects? Give them another minute to debate, discuss, then they will play the last round. At the end of time, you'll convene the objects, you'll collect the objects, and then you'll have a particular discussion. The discussion can go in a number of directions after you do the baseline discussion. So here's how the baseline discussion should work. First, you can ask them, do you feel like you were successful? Thumbs up, thumbs down, how do they know? They can share some criteria. Then you want to ask the following questions. Round 1, one object. How did you feel in round 1? People will talk, they'll say, I felt comfortable, it was kind of boring, it was easy. Round 2, how did you feel? The vast majority of people will say, it was crazy, it was hectic, it was stressful, there was so much going on. There will be some people that will say, it was fun, I loved it. Those are the people that enjoy a lot of things going at the same time. You got to capture that perspective, but what we're looking for is the people that are sharing that it was overwhelming, that it was chaotic, and that it was ineffective. Round 3, how did you feel? Now, some teams, they really get it right. They have the right objects and the right sequence of the right steps, and they just get going. Some teams are still a little bit not perfect in their rhythm, but usually there's improvement. And so generally you'll get answers like, felt good, I was in the zone, we were really working well together, we had a couple of drops, but we kept it going. So those 3 questions are really important because they are the setup for the next round of 3 questions. So again, round 1, how did you feel? Round 2, how did you feel? Round 3, how did you feel? Expect those kind of answers. Then you go back and you have this wonderful opportunity to now teach one of the most important concepts around productivity, performance, and being effective either at work or in your life. So let's talk about how that looks. If you have the opportunity to use a flip chart, it's very helpful. You could have a little dry erase board with you as well, or you could talk through it also. So what you say is this. Let's go back to round 1. You said in round 1 that you felt bored. It was easy. What was happening there is that on the continuum or on the spectrum of how hard it is to how skilled you are, this was easy. So your ability outpaced your challenge. You were living right over here. You were much more skilled than the challenge asked you to do. And in that case, generally, if that's our job, if your job was to throw one ball as a team all day, every day, you would be bored. Round 2 was different. Round 2, the number of objects and the skill required to do that, and the time I gave you to do that, was much higher than what your ability was at that moment. And so you were living over here. And typically over here, when challenge outpaces ability significantly, there's stress, there's anxiety, there's confusion, we make more mistakes. If that was your job for round 2, and yes, it was fun for some people, but if that was actually your job and you got no better at it, this would not be a good place to be. What the research shows, and this is research that you can quote from an academic named Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who's written all the books on flow. Somewhere in here, in his work, there's some optimal space to be. In his world, he calls that flow. It's in other people's language, they might call it being in the zone. It's a place where challenge and ability meet. And when the challenge and the ability is just right, you have the ability and the potential to have peak performance. That's what we tried to help you try to get to in round 3. In round 3, you had 2 chances to discuss and debate, given your ability as a team, what kind of challenge did you want to take on? And you debated, because some people thought you could handle more, some people thought you could handle less. You were debating what you thought, what you were hypothesizing would be the best place to be to give you the greatest chance to be here. What's interesting is that in the research, what's been found is that the best place to succeed for peak performance is where your challenge is a little bit higher than the ability. If you just stay at the same place, you'll achieve a certain level, but when the challenge is a little bit more than what you think you can do or what you know you're capable of, you do better. You perform higher. And this is sort of underlies some of the feelings people have when we talk about, for example, why people would choose to play against a better athlete or a better competitor than you are, because it makes you better. And this research supports that as well. So what's happening is you actually are trying to scaffold and step yourself up. A little more challenge and my ability improves. A little more challenge, my ability improves. And after we teach this, it opens up a great conversation to talk about all the different ways this applies to work, to life, and to our academic experience as well. That's Group Juggle for productivity and performance.